All right, welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to be here for today's webinar, diving into the world of project management and employee resource groups. Before we jump in, I'll briefly introduce myself. My name is Taylor Hayner, and I'm a part of the customer success team at Telescope. We empower organizations to build thriving and impactful ERGs, and I have the privilege of seeing that firsthand. So I'm excited to guide our discussion today and welcome our panelist, Michelle Liang, Senior Program Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Uber Technologies, Inc. Michelle, thanks for joining me today. Can you please share a bit about yourself and your experiences with project management and ERGs?
Yes, well, thank you so much, Taylor and the Telescope team for welcoming me in your webinar. I am Michelle Liang. I'm based in New York City and a senior program manager at Uber within the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team. I've been at Uber for 5 years now, and previous to that, I've spent about 10 years in total within the D&I space, primarily as a program manager, having previously led and co-founded an Asian employee resource group at Marsh & McLennan Companies. And I've worked in project management for almost 20 plus years now, primarily and initially within risk management, insurance companies, as well as edu technologies. And it's been a great pleasure to essentially be in the end-to-end project management and strategic planning across all various lines of businesses and companies.
Amazing. Let's discuss your background. I see you have, it says Build with Heart with your virtual background. So I just wondered if you could tell me more about that.
Sure. This is a illustration of one of the many Uber cultural values that we have. And Build with a Heart is something that is very close to my own values. I think it is very important not just to lead with your gut and your mind, but also with a heart, because after all, at the end of the day, we are working with various people, which is essentially what helps create good in order to continue to do well. And part of that is really building with a heart where you are led by your passion to come up and deliver great desired outcomes that is sustainable and also scalable.
Awesome. I love that. So I'm going to start off with some questions. So the first question, can you share a brief overview of ERGs at Uber so that the audience can visualize the ERG program?
Sure. So as far as the ERGs at Uber, there are 12 ERGs at Uber, Employee Resource Group, that are led by global co-chairs, then also regional chairs, and then chapter chairs. Each chapter originally started with 4 pillars that are careers, commerce, community, and culture. And I would just emphasize this. This is also a particular framework that I've seen in other companies where they have a specific area that is key to the business or specific to what they're looking at for impacting their workforce, their workplace or marketplace. And depending on whichever that particular framework or pillar is what they build their chapter and their governance on. Within Uber, each has their own structure based on what their needs are, but still very much akin to the pillars or the framework that I have mentioned. The global leads meet on a recurring basis to discuss key updates and other related operational strategies from our head of ERGs. I've seen that this model is successful in other companies, such as when, as I mentioned, establishing an Asian employee resource group over 5 years ago.
Are there any benchmarks such as project timelines, budget management, resource allocation that you could share with respect to project management in employee resource groups?
Sure. And I could say that these benchmarks may vary depending on each of the employee resource group OKRs, which is objectives and key results, which by the way have their own distinct action items or related projects. From an operational perspective, for managing the ERGs, there are annual ERG summits where ERG leads come together to meet in celebration of their work and also their commitment to the ERGs, while they take an opportunity to have a FaceTime with their fellow leads and also learn together. And then planning for these summits, by the way, is no easy task, and it requires a lot of thought and coordination, such as scheduling travel, agenda, and also ensuring that the event has a balance of both learning and team building. And so specific to benchmarks, the timelines, the budget management, resource allocation, I would say primarily I would defer the ERGs and their leaders to their head of ERGs, who's essentially responsible for ensuring that the policies as well as other specific timeline, scope, and resources are allocated accordingly. And essentially, all of these are guided by the business policies.
So what do you mean by project management in ERGs? So what does that encompass exactly?
Sure. Project management in ERGs is such that the employee resource group is like having a particular entity where ERGs are seen as product for people with passion for a value or an affinity. Hence, ERGs are actually called also called affinity groups. For a successful ERG, it has to be treated with strategies and tactical approaches, such as in project management, where we have a concept of the iron triangle that includes time, resources, and scope. So does every ERGs. So for ERGs, we are bound by time. Leaders, for instance, typically have a mandate for a given role. Typically, I've seen that for a year. Some, it really depends on the business need and also the needs of pursuing the ERG strategies. And when it comes to resource, we have a nominal resource, an investment or a budget from the D&I organization or the business, and at times specific from the business via the executive sponsor. And we have a number of members we are responsible for to ensure their experience is both impactful and meaningful. All ERGs have committees, and these committees are built and established with a number of dedicated employees who are also volunteers to continue the work dependent of the pillars that they are responsible for. And then lastly, we have scope, such as in project management's, again, iron triangle, scope, time, and resources. And in particular, if we are a leader for a chapter or a region or as a whole, meaning as a global chair, we are responsible and we're volunteering for that particular area of our remit. So from planning and execution standpoint, every event or initiative that the ERGs pursue, it has to be the project first before it can even be part of our daily operations, regardless where there is a start or end date, which means it's a project. There is a set resource requirement for these initiatives and events, whether internal or external. And where we focus our actions, our initiatives, our projects to meet our goals and objectives, it is generally based on what we agree upon as the scope for the particular work.
Okay, so you give out some of the responsibilities through that scope, giving different leaders different titles and responsibilities. So
Yes,
what
certainly.
oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was also going to add that, we don't want to duplicate work, especially when it comes to volunteers who essentially take time out from their daily task and all of their already work responsibilities. So we want to make sure that we are optimizing and we are working within the guidelines of like operational excellence, where we want to make sure that this particular area of or body of work that the volunteer is raising their hand for is something essentially a specific task or a specific project or initiative. And certainly we encourage collaboration too, because either one is passionate or interested or want to stretch themselves. I always been a believer of the importance of having buddy system. And this is, I believe, ERGs are the best place to have that insular level of leadership, using your ability to lead, but also creating a legacy um for what you want to represent and brand yourself as within your company, which also means the opportunity that it presents to be able to mentor and guide another member of the ERG by way of collaborating with them on a particular project within the ERG. But also there is a very importance of that in that you have somebody essentially to continue the work that you're doing. Let's say, for instance, if you're not available that day to step in, or you have more workload than anticipated. And also this is also sharing the learning and the knowledge that you can accumulate on this particular activity or work.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about what makes up different employee resource groups. So now I kind of want to know, what metrics would you recommend for measuring the success of setting up that employee resource group?
Sure. I mean, there's several. I would definitely recommend 100% measuring the impact. What is the outcome of the work that you have delivered? Like in project management, the kinds of metrics would be part of ERG's retrospectives or postmortem. And this would be on areas on stakeholder management. How well did you engage your executive sponsor or your business leaders in a particular initiative? How do we continue to bring value of the ERGs to the business? What is the engagement from employees? So there are such where annually you could do, or even biannually or quarterly, do some sort of engagement surveys. There's also like risk management to really understand what are the blockers and the drivers of the initiatives that you're trying to pursue. And by way of understanding these two important factors, it would essentially give you a better insight into how you can elevate the position of your ERG with your business partners. And then, of course, last but not the least, the strengths and opportunities that come with every work that you do within the ERG. These are important ways to measure, and they can happen actually not just in retrospectives, but these can happen also at the beginning, at the start of the initiative, where you use all of these different factors as a way to almost put your manifesto in the front end, where you're saying, okay, these are my assumptions. I'm going to engage and ensure that my executive sponsor and our ERG have alignment in the objectives that we're going to do. It's going to do well in these areas. And then you can have a look back during your retrospective, where you can actually also help gauge, these are the things in my in the beginning that we've discussed before we started the project, which were our assumptions. And this is actually where we have completed these particular assumptions. And then you can also validate what worked and what didn't work. So in the future, this could be part of your knowledge sharing tool that you can share with other project owners for the ERGs, and they can learn something from it. And it's also somewhat related to metrics in that you want to make sure you document all of these information that you gather, be pre and post. And while some, such as like the engagement surveys, can be quantitative, some other areas of validating these could be qualitative. So you have both types of measurements that's going to be truly impactful to what you're trying to deliver. And then hopefully this would be a great artifact to proceed with when you are also looking at revisiting your budget requirements and your budget ask.
Yeah, as you were discussing all of those different ways to collect metrics and data, it made me think of Telescope's affinities and how on our program we have a ton of different ways to collect data through surveys and different communication tools over there as well. So I was just wondering, in your experience, what are your biggest challenges in project management within ERGs?
Yes, so I would say that before I answer that question, I do want to emphasize what you shared about Telescope's capabilities, because as a user myself, and also a super user actually, and having had to train our teams on the use and adaptability of the tool, there's a lot of opportunities that's already made intuitive by your tool. And I especially appreciate the fact that, it allows me, for instance, to be able to know how many clicks a particular invitation have been delivered, as well as, making sure that we have data for particular acceptances and declines and things of that nature, because it's helpful for us to understand, where like the opportunities, where can we do more, and where do we know that we already have supporters and advocates. So a lot of analyses can be drawn from the metadata that's made available by Telescope. And part of the biggest challenges that I've seen in project management is 100% communication, in the area of communication. So project management is 100% communication. And this was one of the key questions in the PMBOK, which is PMBOK. It's a project management. It's like the book that essentially has all of the requirements and information that's needed for certification for PMP. And, if it hadn't been mentioned, then it wouldn't have been a potential and a continuous strategy that project managers always face. Communication is the biggest challenge, but it's also the biggest opportunities. And being part of an ERG and leading an ERG is a sure way to have a voice and to have a seat at the table. It's essentially giving one access to be able to share their point of view, validate that point of view, and also engage others. And so it's a very, very powerful tool. I would say that communication is power, and while the ERGs is the key to representation, and communication is an instrument in enabling that. We should be thoughtful about communication. Communication planning should have its own work stream within the ERG. And I personally would establish it as its own committee. And a lot of the analyses outputs that comes from all those metrics that we've talked about earlier can essentially be applied in how we best serve our ERG's communication. And something even as simple as knowing when your teams, when some of the membership or the group of organizations that you want to invite, if you're going to do a lunch and learn, but not knowing when some team members actually are not available during that time, or let's just say, for instance, when you're trying to tap multiple and various members across organizations, but your sales team is trying to close books at the end of the month or the quarter, then that's where the communication, the two-way understanding of knowing when that is, and then actually figuring out when the best way to hold that event to accommodate and enable a lot more people than anticipated would be something that's delivered through communication. Another way too is that, we have to be thoughtful about the format of our communication and how we communicate. We are living in the times when diverse abilities is a very is a very core of a sense of belonging. So you want to make sure and also be thoughtful about ensuring that you have like ways to communicate, for instance, when there may be those that have either hearing impairment or sight impairment. So really be thoughtful about how big are your fonts in your presentation. And is it better to talk about your project updates via email or via a platform versus actually having decisions made via Zoom or in person? So these are a couple of things to be thoughtful about, because the outcome of your communication can bring even more challenges if it's not done in a thoughtful manner. Does
So
that
how
answer?
can yeah, no, absolutely. It did answer the question. And it actually leads into the next question of how can technology solutions help in ERG project management? And I know you discussed this a little bit in your previous question with communication and
Sure.
going back with the metrics, but is there anything else that could help with ERG project management?
Oh yes, of course. What as project management, actually, as you know, there's multiple project management software out there. But to have something that specifically for employee resource group is a big plus. At the end of the day, technology solutions for ERG project management is going to be very helpful because it centralizes information. You no longer have to do things or track your membership on a spreadsheet or on some other, document. Having a technology solution or platform has everything there already intuitively and also innovatively. Um, and also I think the user interface is going to be very helpful for when you have to present to a lot of people, especially your executive sponsor. And to have essentially a dashboard is part of the technology solution that takes up all of the information and presents it and illustrates a lot of analysis in a very concise manner. And onboarding and training our ERGs, the use of Telescope has been a phenomenal experience, not just because the tool is already excellent, but I would also say that the customer service that we receive from Telescope has been amazing. And special shout out to Manit on that, because he's been an excellent true partner.
Before we wrap up, because we are getting to the end of the webinar, what are the 3 most important things you would like D&I or ERG program managers to keep in mind when they begin their project management journey?
Sure. There could be more than 3, actually. Maybe I could write an article about that. But as far as the 3 that I could come up right now is, number 1, not necessarily in a particular order, is get to know your members. You are essentially building your team. And I reflect on my experience in the past when starting an employee resource group, having a list of members that essentially would had raised their hand to say they're willing to volunteer for a particular activity, etc. You know, I personally had take some time off during my lunch break and reached out, drafted an email, and sometimes even reached out to individuals directly to understand, learn about their passions and their interests, and also their current roles, and what would they want to do if we're asked to go above and beyond in the work that they're currently doing. And for me to work with these individuals to essentially carve a path which is not necessarily conventional, but yet aligned to their own career goals and objectives, and what kind of brand that they want to have at their company. And I have never had failed in that particular approach. And some of our old business or employee resource group members can attest with this particular approach that in fact they had not said no to the request for them to participate. And then a second would be, like I mentioned before, it's really, really important to understand their passion and interest, because you are creating resources and you're also cultivating relationships, which at the end of the day, it's what matters the most. You go and spend a lot of your time at work, and what is a better way there than to really create relationships, cultivate your professional network. Last but not the least, align your goals and objectives with your business and with your executive sponsor. Essentially, this way you are nurturing the support you are given, and sponsorship is not just nominal. There had been multiple times when in my previous work within ERGs, was able to seek mentorship and sponsorship for myself because of this particular item, where you really have to align your goals and objectives with your executive sponsor. And there had also been times when we need a particular speaker that this particular relationship that I built has been very helpful in reaching out to the executive sponsor without multiple and various steps to do that, because you've already built that trust, and also the quality that you are looking out for that person as much as that person is also looking out for you. And So essentially, get to know your members, understand their passions and their interests, and align the goals and objectives. And those are the three pearls of nuggets, or pearls of wisdom, I should say, and nuggets of wisdom that I'd like to share.
Amazing. Thank you. So it sounds like, communication is huge in ERGs and also just bringing everyone together through one kind of platform, one place to connect.
Yes, certainly.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being here and sharing your expertise. And thank you for those who have tuned in, and stay tuned for future webinars.
Thank you so much for having me.